Be honest. Be honest about our addictions.
Yes, true also. But what about when we're talking specifically about the hurt self? So we've done some work on this facade and addictions. How are we going to begin to experience our hurt self? Joy?
I'm guessing it's going to be a similar experience to deconstructing the facade.
Yes.
So first we want to have some intellectual awareness to accept that there is damage to ourself.
Yes.
And be willing to explore that.
Yeah. So let's say our first point is that we have to acknowledge that the hurt self even exists.
Yes.
And in fact, it feels very childlike a lot of the time. What did you notice when you saw Jesus put up the two slides about the feelings involved with the adult facade compared to the feelings involved with the hurt self? What did you notice in terms of the difference between the feelings?
Basically, the facade, my facade self is quite adult, and the hurt self quite childlike.
Yes, very important point. Yep. Yeah. Something else, Eloisa? Do you want
to? How God's actually made me is like cool as. Like I'm like fun and courageous, and I have all these things that I'm trying to have at the moment. Whereas my adult self is like real hard and nasty and...
Okay, so your adult facade, the feelings are quite hard and nasty, aren't they?
Yeah, they do mean
Now,
stuff.
what about the hurt self? You skipped that one. You went straight to the real one.
Yeah, no.
How were the...
That's because I just want to go there.
Yeah, I know. So you're right, the adult facade feelings are quite hard, aren't they? They're quite rigid, quite hard. And then the hurt self, all those descriptive words that you heard...
I think I was out at that time.
You might have been out of the room. Can anyone else remember? If we go to Nina over here.
They actually felt a lot softer.
A lot softer, didn't they? Yeah. So remember when Jesus was talking to you about the hurt self, it's the hurt parts of ourselves that we've suppressed at various ages, starting from childhood, and when we connect to those feelings, they're going to feel really childlike when we experience them. But he also talked about when we're adults and we shut down our hurt, and we're going to have to experience those feelings as well. But they're going to feel soft when we connect to them because they're not our facade, they're not our anger or resistance. The hurt self feels soft when it connects to things. And often we associate that with something that's childlike, don't we? Softness, pliability, willingness to be vulnerable and go into feelings. So that's what we're going to have to first. Before we even start feeling anything, we have to acknowledge that this part of us is inside of us. Now, if you think about it, a lot of us have a lot of resistance to even that concept emotionally. The thought that inside of me, there's a self that feels pretty sad and pretty soft and doesn't have any big armour on to go out and face the world. So I have to acknowledge that they exist. What do you think the second thing is we need to do? Joanne?
To have compassion for that hurt child?
I agree. We have to begin to have compassion for that hurt child. But before we do that, wouldn't it be good to figure out how we're currently treating them?
Yes, yes.
So number 2 I want to put on our list is to acknowledge our current treatment of our hurt child, or a hurt self, let's call it. How do you currently treat this hurt part of yourself, Barbara?
Totally ignore it.
Okay, you ignore. I'm going to write a list. Ignore. Who else has got one? Sorry, I have to look, don't I? Louise. And then over here we go to Cecily. Yep.
I've shamed mine in the past.
Shame. Yes, we shame them. Who was it on that side? Cess? Yep.
I'm as cruel to her as those were cruel to me.
And this is an interesting part of it, isn't it? You feel you're quite cruel to these hurt parts of yourself, and very often it's because that was modelled to you when you were little. Denise, you had your hand up.
I dismiss it.
Dismiss. Yes. Come on, you.
It's not as bad as that.
It's not as bad as that. And you're complicating my life now. I've got things to do. I've got to get on with things. Yeah. Who else? If we go to Laura here and Luli there.
I get frustrated and angry with her.
Yes. Come on, you shouldn't be feeling this. You should be over
Like
this.
a whip.
Hurry up. Yeah. Yeah. So we're very harsh, aren't we? Yeah. Okay. What was that? Dismissive. And Luli, what was yours?
Judge it
Yeah. How do you judge your hurt child?
as weak
Weak. Yeah.
and not going to be able to cope.
Not being able to cope. Yep. All those things. So judging. Anyone else? Yeah. If we go to Marion and Suze.
I find I want to get away from her.
Sorry.
I find I want to get away from her. When that comes up, it's like there's a kind of a panic.
A panic. So
Yes.
you're afraid.
Yeah. Yes,
of
huge
these hurt
fear comes up
feelings.
and I
This-
just want to run away.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you want denial again, kind of thing.
Any kind of relief.
Yes.
It's like, get me out of here.
Yep. So panic, that's a good word. Marion?
I have really high expectations that it will shift very quickly. I'm quite ambitious that it'll come out and move and be gone, like Mum
So-
had on me.
Can we call it pushy?
Very pushy.
Pushy, yep. What about, if we go across here to Eva?
I laugh at my hurt.
You laugh. You
Yeah.
laugh at her.
I laugh.
So you're almost involved in calling her silly, would you say? Yep. Yep. Yeah. Ridiculing. What about one that we might not, oh goodness, there we go, that we might not think is that terrible a treatment. In fact, we might think it's quite nice and go, yeah, if we go Vanessa.
Mollycoddle her, like say, oh, you poor thing and poor me, that kind of
Poor
thing.
me,
Yeah.
It's all too hard. It's okay. You don't really have to face any
Yeah, just do a little bit, 5
Yeah.
minutes, yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay. Have a cup of tea.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. So mollycoddling. And also another one that I notice some of you do is the cheer up. Come on, let's go outside. Have a walk. You'll be right. But is that really kind to your hurt self? It's actually quite harsh. It's saying your feelings aren't even important enough to feel. Yeah. Okay, so we're all pretty good at this harsh treatment, huh? Glenn, you had a question, or you? If you just keep your hand up, Glenn, yeah.
It's like you lick the wounds and just...
Sorry?
You like lick the wounds. And
Lick
just-
the wounds, yeah, and huddle
just-
and go, oh, you shouldn't have to do any more of that.
I'm hurt, I'm in pain. It's-
Like Jesus was saying about the, you fall down the stairs and it hurts and you go, oh, I'll never do that again. Yeah. And that's really the adult facade acting upon the hurt child, isn't it? It's saying, don't feel about it, just avoid it. Yeah. So, question? Yep. Yeah. I've got to keep moving, so yeah. So this treatment, and I'm going to call it harsh treatment. Is that fair? We have to acknowledge the current harsh treatment. is actually something coming from our facade to shut down our hurt self. Make sense? Yeah? Okay, now if we're going to get on with experiencing this hurt self, what are we going to do next? Laura?
Intellectually see that it's a sin, that it's wrong.
Yeah. Well, actually, when we start this process, we're intellectually doing both of these things, really, aren't we? Yeah. What happens, do you think, when we start to get emotionally in touch with these things? What would be the next logical thing to do? If we know, okay, I have a hurt self, and it's a part of me that has been shut down, and it's a part of me that needs to be experienced, but currently I'm treating it really harshly, and that's shutting it down even more, keeping it shut down. What should I do? Joy?
I think at that stage I'd want to see how God would treat me.
Yeah, way ahead of ourselves. Let's just go.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Let's just go. Let's stop the harsh treatment.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Sound all right? Yeah. All good ideas, but way down the track. And honestly, guys, it really... You're not going to be able to skip these steps. You know, you are going to actually have to emotionally acknowledge there's a hurt self inside of me. And that will be emotional. You recognise some fear will come up in that place. And then emotionally let yourself feel how you are treating this part of yourself. And that will be very emotional. Joy?
And so the acknowledgement that I'm treating myself harshly will probably indicate that I'm treating others harshly as well.
Yeah, well, you might be treating the hurt self of others quite harshly, mightn't you? Because this is your belief, this is how we should treat the hurt in me, so treat it the same in you. Yeah. Come on, go for a walk. You're right. Aren't you over that yet? Karen?
Is this different to when we were we tend to blame ourselves in order to avoid our parents blaming us? Is this part of that, or is that a different thing?
Yeah, well, that's how we end up treating our hurt self, don't we? We get really hard and punishing and blaming instead of feeling. And that is often a reflection of either how our parents treated us or mechanisms we used to try to shut down the hurt that was there. So if I blame myself, I don't have to feel that someone else is being hard on me. That's a way we use to shut down the hurt self.
So we don't necessarily treat others that way, we just treat ourselves that way rather than feel others are treating us that way?
It's not necessarily, but just experiment with your awareness on that one.
Okay.
Because in my experience, it's pretty common to see for yourself, you're thinking, well, I'm blaming myself, I'm not blaming others. But do you encourage others to blame themselves? Like your kids as you're raising them, things like that?
Right.
Because if that's a part of your soul and the way that you are keeping your hurt self at bay, you're automatically modelling this to the people around you, that this is the way you treat hurt or this is the way you avoid hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a good thing to experiment with, guys. Part of your homework is going to be to start this process. And let yourself discover the specific ways you are treating your hurt self. And then for the next week, just let yourself sit with the question as you go about and interact with others. Am I treating their hurt self in the same way? Okay, what's next on the list? What should we do after this, Vanessa? Oh, just keep your hand up, everyone. It's a bit hard because it's a bit dark and not everyone knows everyone's name.
I've been wondering lately too, is there such a thing as repentance towards yourself and your whole soul? So for every so, you know, for instance, if you've been promiscuous, every time you've had a partner, you've actually hurt your soulmate as well.
Yes.
As well as yourself, as well as the people. So would repentance be a part of this process?
Not yet, because we're not yet experiencing the hurt self, are we? Okay. And how can we repent if we're not yet connected? So it's coming, and Jesus is going to speak to you really at length about the processes of repentance and forgiveness in a couple of days. So it's a good reflection. Keep it in mind as we progress through the week. Yeah. Cecily?
Feel the pain of the hurt self.
Almost. But my experience showed me there's one more step in between. Sheridan?
Just let ourselves become aware of our hurt self, or
let ourselves become aware of our hurt self.
And see it and acknowledge more.
Yes. Well, look, let me tell you about these 3 first steps. You're going to go through them and then get to 3 and have to go, oh, there's more in 1 now. I see more of my hurt self now. I can feel more of my hurt self now. Wow, how am I treating it? Oh, yeah, there's even more harsh treatment that I'm aware of now. Oh, have a good cry about that one, you know. And then we have to exercise our will to make a choice to stop this harsh treatment. See, nobody's really cared for these hurt parts of ourselves before. Not even us. And someone's going to have to start doing that, and there's no one else but you to do it. So you're going to have to harness your will to stop this harsh treatment. And as you do, you're right, Sheridan, the awareness keeps growing, the acknowledgement keeps growing, and this is an emotional process, remember. But there's one really important thing that comes next. So here you are, you've gained an awareness of this hurt self, if you like. You've stopped treating it harshly, which is a really awesome, great step. It's the beginning of caring. What comes next, Steve?
Just letting the hurt self be there, letting it exist, and not trying to suppress it.
Not trying to suppress it. So what would you be encouraging it to do if you weren't suppressing it? Imagine you had a little kid here, just been treated harshly, and you said, suppression's over, no more harsh treatment for you. Just be yourself. What might that kid start doing?
Yeah, just expressing itself, letting it flow.
Yeah, having a voice, mightn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. So, you're going to start allowing yourself to have a voice. To say the things that you didn't say, that you didn't get to say, that you wanted to say. So when I say allow your voice here, I'm meaning allowing the voice of your hurt self. Let it say the truth of what happened. A lot of times we're really shutting down that whole thing. Dave?
In that process, would you love the hurt child?
Getting ahead of ourselves. But if you think about it, isn't number 4 the beginning of showing some love? Or 3 is really ceasing the lack of love, if you like. But 4 is starting to show love, isn't it? Just like you would to a little child, you're now showing it to yourself. What do you want to say? You've been shut up for years and years. What do you want to say right now? Let's hear it. Okay. Now, what usually happens when someone gives voice to their feelings? Rachel?
The people around you go into panic. Try and shut you down even more.
Okay, we're doing all of this in the privacy of our own home.
Okay.
So there's no one else around. What happens when remember, there's no more harsh treatment. There's no more harsh treatment coming towards this hurt child. So it's in a space where it feels allowed to have its voice. What might it start to have as it has its voice? If you go next to you to Louise.
Oh, just her feelings will come up?
Yes. So I'm going to rub off the first 4 and we'll go to 5. So, again though, you're going to have to allow this little hurt self, the childlike hurt feelings, if you like, to have their feelings, to be experienced. So it's not magic either. It will happen much easier once you stop all the harsh treatment and judgment and punishment and all of these things. But you're still going to have to use your will to allow this process. And guess how it's going to feel? Awesome? Well, I tell you what it's going to feel. Overwhelming. It's going to feel overwhelming. So you can see there's a lot of steps, isn't there, before we even really get to feeling these feelings. Now, 5 was allow the hurt childlike feelings. And you could relate to that, yeah? When you feel like you're in a really safe environment and you say what you wanted to say or you say the truth, very often it connects you emotionally, doesn't it? Yeah. Matt, you had a question? Yep.
And are they feelings of like what's been done to me? Is it all? Can that also be like the hurt childlike feelings heard about what you've done to someone else?
Definitely.
Cool.
Definitely.
I can relate to that very
Yeah.
much then.
Yeah, that's good, hey? Yeah. Remember, these hurt childlike feelings are the ones that Jesus had up on his slide that are softer. They're pain, there's fear, there's pain, there's grief, there's all these things, but they're much softer. You're feeling softer now, you're feeling a flow of emotions rather than rigidly. How many of you tried to process your emotions while pushing yourself? Come on, get into this. You didn't do that, that wasn't long enough. Did you time that? 15 minutes, how am I ever going to get to be at one with God? It's not like that. That is your adult facade in operation. When we get to this place, we have to give all that up. We're being kind now to a part of ourselves that hasn't been loved before. Make sense? Okay, what's going to happen next? This is now we're starting to experience this hurt child. What do we need to do now? And some of you have already been trying to jump the gun on this one. So what should we do now with this hurt child? Felix?
Just give it love.
Yeah. Let's take care of it, hey? Yeah. Take care of the hurt parts of ourselves. And what would that be like? Who can give me some examples? How would we do that? How would we take care of this part of ourselves, Cecily?
Make plenty of time for her.
Yes. So let's take time. We won't be watching that clock anymore, timing the bouts of tears. We'll be saying, and we won't be rushing around with our to-do list every morning going, oh, I've got to get all this done or I'm not a worthy woman. We'll be saying, you know what? You've been shut up and shut down for a really, really long time. Now is your time. I'm going to give you time and space to tell me what you feel, to let those feelings come. What else might we do, Joy?
I'm thinking of the Corinthians passage, love is always patient and kind.
So we'll be patient with ourselves, with these hurt, childlike, and it will feel very childlike, guys, you know. You're going to have to be patient, and, you know, these expressions that come out of you will often sound just like a child. And the things they want to say to you might sound just like a 2-year-old is speaking with you. It's speaking from you. You know, it's a part of you. We're not separate. This is why we need to, I'm calling it the hurt parts of ourselves. It's not a separate little kid that you're going to have with you all this time. It's just parts of yourself that have stayed at that age. There's a lot of inner child kind of philosophy that says your inner child will be a child forever and stay a child forever. And I don't believe that. I believe that these parts of ourselves should get the chance to mature, to feel what they needed to feel. And the awesome thing is that they just keep the best bits. The bits that you saw in the real self description, the curiosity, the inquisitiveness, the passion, the desire, all of those things that we often associate with children are stuck underneath and sometimes in with all these hurt parts of ourselves that have been shut down. So we're going to be patient with ourselves as we feel these feelings. What else are we going to do? Louise?
I practice sometimes. I crave warmth. My hurt child craves warmth, and just looking into her eyes with this patience and love, and just
so you mean
listening.
Emotional warmth?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, just this openness. That's what I imagine in myself that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. So you're practicing being warm and open to these parts of yourself that feel quite childlike.
Yeah, and just looking into her eyes with this love.
So looking into your eyes, though, isn't it?
My
just
eyes.
so we don't confuse
yes, my
we don't want to be more fragmented. We want to bring it all together. So looking into your own eyes, but just trying to display this love to these parts of yourself. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Barbara?
Sitting here, I was thinking about my inner child is definitely going to need some encouragement.
Aha, yes, that's a good one. So we're going to be encouraging. As these hurt feelings surface that feel quite childlike, we're going to be telling ourselves, what might we be telling ourselves? And we're skipping into almost to the next point, but...
It's all okay.
It's okay. And what is that?
It's okay to feel what you're feeling.
Yeah, but what are you telling them? What is that? That's a statement of...
Truth.
Truth, yes. So we're going to tell ourselves the truth as we go through this. We're going to say, yep, I'm feeling hurt and frightened, but I was built to feel this. So we're going to tell the truth. And also, of course, we've been letting these parts of ourselves tell the truth about what they've been sitting on for all these years of like, nobody pays any attention to me, or I want to get what I want, or whatever it is. But tell the truth, and I should call it probably God's truth to these parts of ourselves. And this is where we're starting to get into the final, very, very crucial thing that we need to do in this process of experiencing and really healing the hurt self and allowing this maturity to happen. So what might we call this? So we're taking care, we're showing love. What is something that these parts of ourselves have missed out on? Diana?
Being introduced to God and God's love.
Yeah, so they're lacking a good education, aren't they? They haven't had a good education. So we're going to educate these parts of ourselves, because if you think about it, these parts of ourselves, we've suppressed them so much. It's almost like they don't even have an awareness of everything else that's going on in our life. You know, we're wandering around and there's a part of us that's like balled up like a rock just here under our rib that's hurt, and we don't want to know about it. And so we're having these experiences. We're even coming to a Divine Truth seminar. We're learning all this stuff. But can this balled up rock hard part of us know about it? Because really, a lot of times we're in those seminars interacting in our facade even, aren't we? Yeah. Sometimes the hurt selves come out and the tears flow a bit, and that's when there's more receptivity to gaining this education. But in order to heal this hurt self, you're going to need to give yourself this education, if that makes sense. give these parts of yourself this education. So what might you... Diana started on one really, really important thing to educate ourselves on, which is God's truth, the truth about the universe. And what other aspects of that might you want these childlike hurt parts of yourself to know about that they didn't ever hear about? Laura?
That she has a unique personality and beautiful qualities that are inside her.
So the truth about
Soul.
yourself, the soul, who you really are, yeah. What else? So I've got down God and the universe, the human soul. Who else has got an idea? Joy?
God's laws.
God's laws, sure. Let's get more personal. What are some things that you can feel your hurt self didn't learn about? Alan? Oh. Karen, are you off in your hurt child?
God's love.
God's love, sure. Yeah, definitely. Fabio?
How to really have fun.
How to really have fun? Yeah, well, if you think about it, though, as we experience our hurt self, it's probably going to have more to teach us about having fun, isn't it, than our facade is? Yeah. Laura?
I would have really have loved to learn about my will and that I have a use of a will.
You have a will? I'll tell you some of the things that I've been working on educating my hurt self about. Ethics and morality. Sex and my body. Soulmates. That my desires and interests are okay. That I'm allowed to be an individual and want what I want and feel what I feel. And this is where you can become really good, almost like a parent to the hurt parts of yourself. So again, it's not like there's separate entities, but it's finding these parts of yourself, and then because they haven't developed, just like Jesus had on his slide today, the hurt self isn't developed in these areas. These are some of the areas, and you're going to find it's different for each of you. The different areas where you realise, wow, this hurt part of myself has no idea about the truth about my family, the truth about my relationship, the truth about soulmates. Since I started experiencing some of my hurt self, I've had cries and then gotten up to make the dinner and gotten up and thought, oh my gosh, I'm a really tall person. I'm really as tall as the fridge. It was literally as if there was a part of myself that had no concept of that I had grown from this big to this big. Alwyn?
What comes to me a wee bit further back is that you are lovable. You are lovable.
You are lovable, yeah, beautiful, yes. And can you see that as you begin to give these parts of yourself a voice and you begin to allow them to have their feelings and you stop judging them and stop punishing them and begin to educate them, they begin to even feel lovable, don't they? Because they are receiving this loving environment from you, internally, if you like. Yeah. Louise?
Mary, I'm just wondering, those of us sitting in the Divine Love sessions and listening to all this stuff, isn't the hurt child listening to that? Do we have to actually tell it about it since...
Well, if you think about it though, Louise, how connected are you to your hurt self while you're sitting in this seminar?
Yeah, not very.
So how can you expect your hurt self to be hearing any of it?
So you assume it hasn't heard any of this stuff?
Well, you'll know when you connect to it, you'll go, yep, this part of me has no idea about love.
Okay.
This part of me doesn't believe in God. This part of me feels hopeless in the worst kind of way. Yeah. And that's where you start to give the education, a loving education.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Paige?
Mary, I was just wondering if you could give us some examples as to how you've actually educated yourself with some of these things. Like, I'm assuming it's an experiential education?
Yeah. I was going to recommend to you guys a book that I admit I haven't really worked my way all the way through. But what I was going to say is I found I just needed a way to connect with this hurt part of myself. First off. And this book gave me some tools to do that. And I know there's Homecoming, John Bradshaw. I've never read it. I don't know if... what I'm recommending is find a tool to connect to this hurt part of yourself. Mind you, it's not going to be a magic bullet. You're going to have to do all the work on your facade. Like, I couldn't even look at anything about the inner child work you had to do for years. I hated it. Hated it. You know, I was angry about it. Don't even tell me there's another part of me. I don't want to know. So when you've worked through enough of your facade and actually desiring now to connect more to your hurt self, I suggest you probably attract something like this book, which is what I did. But I'll leave it around in the dining room for people to have a look at if they want to. And it's referenced on your summary of this talk that'll be on the internet. But what I found was just doing a lot of journal work. Paige helped me initially connect and then to educate. It's an emotional education. And also it's got to be reinforced by the actions that you take. You know, a lot of us have a hurt child or a hurt childlike feeling inside of we're really afraid a lot of the time. And what do? Just come on, get through it. Come on, you'll be right. And that only serves to hurt ourselves more. We have to be soft to those feelings and then go ahead with our desires. But while we're being harsh and nasty and pushing ourselves into situations where that hurt part of ourselves really doesn't want to go, we're not allowing anything, and we certainly are becoming hypocrites if we're also saying, you're allowed to feel your feelings, this part of me is allowed to feel like this, but come on, we're doing this, you know. So I feel it's emotional, and it's almost like a dialogue, I suppose, internally, with a fragment of yourself. I really want to get away from saying it's another being. It's just fragments of yourself that haven't received from anyone else loving education. And so it's emotionally and sometimes internally, verbally, telling the truth, acting in harmony with what you're saying as well, you know, and allowing the feelings. And once that becomes more routine, I feel you then get more and more in touch with your hurt self. You have a stronger sense of your emotions all of the time, and you also have a stronger sense of what's lacking in terms of your knowledge of love. And you can begin to seek out experiences that will help you learn about that, as well as acting in the faith that you've already established. Does that make sense? Dave?
Could you try, kind of imagine it like a circuit board where part of the circuit board wasn't getting electricity or energy?
Yeah.
And then so it's just been completely deactivated basically, and what you're trying to do is get energy back.
Make a reconnection.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's basically sort of similar like that, isn't it?
It is similar like that, except that if you think about the circuit board, most of it is out of power at the moment. There's a few little... and you're trying to make connections to all kinds of bits that are shut down at different ages.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it's the one, the complete board though. That's it.
That's
you're
right.
Just
it's
returning on, refeeding little parts.
Yes. And if you think about it, this hurt self is a lot closer to your real self than your facade. Your facade's like a big cover you want to put over the whole circuit board.
Yep.
And say, nothing here. All the circuitry's wonderful. It's fantastic, you know. But when you take it off, if you like, as you're going through this emotional work, you go, wow, there's a mess of wires in there and not much is connected. And this bit seems to know a bit about this, but this one had these experiences, but this one's got no idea about any of it. Because when I was 3, it got shut down, and ever since then, and this is the important thing to recognise, ever since then I've been doing it.
So it's still got the old operating system happening as well.
Yes. The old operating system. You're going to have to take the operating system out, and that's going to be emotional.
Reformat.
Reformat and input new software. Am I mixing my analogies now? I don't really know how it works, but yeah.
It's making sense now.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions, Suzanne? Yeah.
Mary, I really experienced my hurt self recently, and I was in such a small place, I couldn't even complete the conversation. And so I'm kind of wondering how, when you're in that place, I couldn't have talked to myself because I was there. I was in that, it's like a place I went to, and I couldn't even function.
Yeah. So you need to allow the hurt child their feelings. When the hurt child is having their feelings, it's not a time to enter dialogue.
Okay.
The hurt, oh man, I keep saying hurt child. When the hurt parts of yourself are having the feelings, just let it happen.
Okay.
That's an important part of it.
Okay.
Okay, and it's
So
not the time to go,
misunderstood.
it'll be all right. If you like, if you're reassuring, that's fine. If you're being kind and taking care, then you might take yourself to a place where you can fully experience.
So I don't rush away from that experience.
No,
Stay
in
it,
fact, you
yeah.
want to encourage that experience because it's been shut down for a long time. Did everyone hear Suzanne's question? Yep. So, no. She was in an experience where she felt very connected to this hurt self. She felt very small and childlike. And she was saying, is that the time to start educating? And I'm saying, no, that's the time to embrace allowance of those feelings. And just love and care for yourself in that. So you might remove yourself to a place where you can really experience those feelings. And you be patient and kind and gentle with yourself. And then after that process, that's when, or sometimes immediately after, then you can start saying some truth. You know? That was a normal experience because you've been shut down for a long time. You know, you might feel like you're 3. And then you go, you know, I'm not 3 anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just in shock for quite a while. And then I was ashamed of myself.
And see, this is when the facade kicks back in.
Kicks back in.
The shock is about the fear that the adult facade's like going, hang on, I'm not in control anymore. Cut this out. Oh, and it's your fear really being exposed of experiencing the hurt self more often. And then the shame is like, oh, I've done something wrong. And that is when you can start this education. Say, now hang on. This is an error-based feeling, this shame. I have nothing to be ashamed of. I just felt something.
Something real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Lulu, yep.
I'm just wondering how this fits in with the last talk about working through the layers of the facade self. Like, when you get to the soul feeling parts of the facade self, is that basically when you're in the hurt self?
Yeah, you're getting towards the hurt self then.
Right, so you kind of integrate these steps in that latter part of the facade self steps.
Yeah. I suppose what I feel from what I've experienced so far is that process that Jesus outlined, the intellectual awareness, the many levels that happen, and then you begin to get into the soul awareness, is that sometimes I've done that with purely facade emotions, if that makes sense. It's like giving up an addiction. Like the soul-based process was like coming to terms with the grief that what I expected and demanded was not loving and I couldn't expect and demand it anymore. And a bit of my facade fell away. But then there's other things where you'll start to get into the hurt self through that experience. But I do want to maybe ask Jesus if he would help clarify that because, I feel like I'm a novice still at that. Like, I'm just starting here. Yeah.
Because I've had experiences where I get into the hurt self, but I don't stay there. And I'm thinking it's because there's more facade to work through before I can properly get in there?
Yeah, yep. I think again, like there's parts of your facade that you'll let go of, but also there's the fight of the facade to get you away from the hurt self, isn't there? Anyway, babe, could I ask you to clarify some of that? Is that all right? Do you want to do it now or later? Now? Yep. Yep. Right, just come here.
Yeah, the process that I described in the adult facade applies entirely also to the hurt self. So you go through intellectual stages of coming to awareness of your hurt self. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, I didn't mention that, did I?
And so it's really exactly the same process that you're going through, but Mary's adding additional things here that each of you will need to do in order to allow the hurt child to actually go through the same process. Does that make sense? So the hurt child is going through the same process as the adult facade has to go through. There's the same levels of intellectual awareness and the same levels of emotional awareness into getting into every issue. And bear in mind that some of these issues are repentant-based and some of them are forgiveness-based. And in addition to that, in order to get to the hurt self, you need to do these additional things Mary is mentioning. And every one of you will have to do it. This is not like Mary's personal experience. This is what every person who ever has to go through their hurt self, if you like, has to do, which is the same process that you have to do to get through your adult facade with these additional steps, because there's a re-educational process that needs to occur and there's a loving process that has to occur that the adult facade's not very good at, but the hurt self needs to be taken care of. Yeah.
So a lot of those first 4 or 5 steps that I talked about, we often have an intellectual awareness of them first, that there's an existence of a hurt child, that we're treating our hurt parts of ourselves harshly, and before we even connect to it emotionally. And a lot of you have started to do that intellectually, haven't you? Recognising that, oh, there are hurt parts of me that feel childlike and I'm not treating them very nicely. Yeah. But then you're going to have to go through the soul awareness parts of it. And that's when the change, that's when you begin to start to experience these hurt parts of yourself.
Yes, like even stopping the harsh treatment of the child is an emotional process, because you have to go through, firstly, emotionally recognising that you actually treat your child harshly. Yeah. Does that make sense? And you're like, it's like for most people, if most of you had a child in front of you, if you look at the average parent, the way it treats a child, it treats a child pretty harshly. The child starts crying, what does it say? It says, shut up or I'll give you something to cry about. There's the adult facade right in play. And that adult facade's going to have to go through repentance about its treatment of the child. It's going to have to go through an emotional process to release that kind of treatment of the child before you can even change or stop the treatment. So remember, even every one of these steps that Mary's mentioning is actually an emotional step. Right? And it involves the same process as what your facade self had to go through to recognise and clear away any emotional impediment to love.
Yeah, and I have to say that for myself, just that emotional acknowledgement of the harsh treatment was very emotional for me. Days of just recognising more emotionally how I was treating these hurt parts of myself, the messages I was giving these parts of myself constantly. Do you have more, darling, to say? Thank you. Margaret?
I have a question about how do we treat the facade self when we're going through this process? Are we supposed to be equally kind to it or hard on it? I feel like I tend to be hard on about everything in myself. And seems to me like when you talk about one being aware of how we treat ourselves and then changing that, I don't know, it feels like the facade is harder work. Maybe because I have to confront my unloving choices. Maybe that's it, the required humility or something. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know if my question's clear. But.
Your first question was, do we have to be equally as kind to the facade as we're ceasing the facade? And I feel yes. Okay. I feel any kind of harsh treatment of any part of ourselves is not loving. And love is the most powerful motivator and environment for change in my experience. And also, we need to recognise why the facade exists. If we really recognise why it exists, does anyone remember why it exists from Jesus' discussion? Cecily?
For survival and protection.
When we were little, because, we were taught that this was a better way to be than the way we actually were. And then we perpetuated it, and why did we perpetuate it? Because we still had that same belief. So if we're going to let go of the facade, I feel we do need to be compassionate with ourselves about why it exists, but also we need to see, just as Jesus said in his talk, that it's not serving us, and actually it's not really that nice. So it is something that has going to have to be let go if we want to grow and, become more loving individuals. Yeah. Darlin?
I feel we've got to be careful here, though, because a lot of us judge any honesty as if it's harsh. So honesty is not harsh. Bluntness and honesty is direct and to the point, and actually the most loving thing that you could do. So the adult facade needs to be treated with a lot of firmness and honesty, and that is loving.
Yes.
Right. And also the hurt child needs to be treated with firmness and honesty too. You can allow it to be a victim for the rest of your life if you want, but that's not going to heal it. So this is what I've noticed a lot of people doing with a hurt child. They say, yes, you were hurt, it was terrible, wasn't it? And you're right, you're allowed to stay in this for as long as you want. And none of those things are really true. They need to go through an emotional process, and unless you're firm about that, you won't go through the process. So you've got to be very careful that you don't, you've got to separate what you believe to be harsh treatment, and your belief of harsh treatment is very different to what harsh treatment really is, and that's a part of the facade, right? But you've got to be very careful that you don't mix things up here and go, okay, I'm going to let my little hurt self get away with murder. And many of us do, by the way, let that happen. And just like we let our adult facade get away with murder as well. And literally, we let it get away with murder sometimes. Like, when it comes to things like abortions, we're letting our adult facade and our hurt child get away with murder. Is that the right thing to do? Definitely not. So this is where we've got to educate both this hurt child and our real self about those matters.
Yeah, we do have to educate. And something that I wanted to mention before finishing was that experiencing the hurt self is not, when we're experiencing those feelings, there's not blaming going on. There's not justifying of poor behaviour. There's not sitting in the corner kind of, woe is me, I should just make a cup of tea and hide from the world because it is too all scary out there. All those things that are very often associated with feeling childlike and hurt, that if we're educating ourselves properly, we'll know that blaming is not really feeling. Blaming is trying to make someone else feel. And we're feeling injustice in that place. Now, we might actually experience feelings of a lack of justice in our childhood, but while we do that, we won't be blaming as much as we will be feeling. Does that make sense to everyone? It's quite different energetically. Matthew? And we won't be justifying poor treatment or poor behaviour. We'll be looking at ethics and morality. A lot of our hurt selves are injured in the way that we feel that we should be able to get away with anything. And that's not the way God's universe operates. So this is where the loving education is so important. Matt?
So I was thinking about this before, so the facade, and when you're in denial of the hurt self, you project it out at other people and stuff, but it's different when you're feeling it. I know that.
Yeah, are you meaning about feelings? When we're in our facade,
yeah,
we want to blame and point fingers.
Like it always goes out at other people. I think.
Very often. Yeah, It's projections.
Yeah,
you're talking
projection.
about. Yeah. Whereas when we're experiencing our hurt, we are simply feeling how hurt the lack of justice felt, how painful that felt, rather than saying. What I see a lot of you guys doing at times is going, yeah, I've got these issues because my mum was terrible, and really you're still in a lot of blame. Now, while it might be true that there was harsh treatment in your relationship with your mum, while you still have this feeling of like it's her fault that I'm like I am, you are blaming and not owning that you have a will to feel the hurt. And actually you're responsible for loving these parts of yourself and feeling them now. No one else can do it for you, and until you do it, you won't grow in love.